Hey guys, today's video I'm going to talk about aperture or aperture setting, more or less for around portrait photography. And because portrait and landscape photography vary so much, it's really a separate conversation, and I'm going to show you just an example why. This is two photos I took in Chicago. This is Google Photos. I'm doing screen grab on my iPad. And same lens. This is a 16mm f1.4 shot at f1.4, close to my subject, and the background is blown out. Same lens, same aperture setting, and I have distance between me and my subject. It's a wider angle lens, 16mm, and pretty much everything is in focus. This is a landscape type of photo, and as you can see, very huge difference between the two. This video is more talking about portraiture, taking pictures of people. I'm not a pro. I'm continuously looking at the photos that I've taken, my focus, my depth of field. Is it what I want it to achieve? And more often than not, it's not. I'm going to show you some examples of what I probably did wrong, and maybe it'll help you, right? So I went to a graduation party. I was at my friend's daughter's graduation party, and she asked me if I had my camera. I left it at home. Usually I don't, but I ran home and got it. And she asked me, like I did last time for her, take pictures of the family, just to capture that day for her and her family and her daughter's graduation. So I'm gonna kind of talk about the settings I used and why I used them, and what I should have done better. And we're talking about one person. This is a cute girl. She was eating a cupcake, and very cute. I shot this with my 35mm f2. I had a couple lenses only with me. I had 35 f2, which is a great lens. I just started using it more and more, and the 10-24 wide angle, because I knew I'd probably want to get, you know, a wider shot on some of these, especially indoors. When you're shooting one person, you can, if you want to get the blurry, blown out background. Now this is wide open at f2 because it's a 35mm f2. It's that small Fujifilm lens, and you lock on the eye, and it doesn't matter if it's the 56-1.2. As you can see, I can zoom the sucker in all the way, and it is just in focus, sharp as can be on the eye. And as long as you nail your eyes, one person, not a big deal, because around that eye, it's going to slowly graduate out of focus. What gets a little trickier is when you're talking about multiple people. Let's take a look at some of these other photos. This was my 10-24mm shot at, I believe, 10mm. Yep, 10mm. And I was trying to retain that ISO. It's getting kind of dusk. This is f4. There's a few things that change your depth of field. You don't always want a shallow depth of field. If you have a lot of people you're trying to get in the photo, you don't want half of them blurry, right? So it just looks stupid. It's better to have more grain than blurry faces. So again, there's a few things that affect depth of field. One is your sensor size, and when I'm talking about these settings, this is APSC crop sensor. Fujifilm is what I shoot, but it could be applied to Canon, Nikon, Sony, whatever. If you have a medium format or a larger format like a full frame sensor, you can either adjust or make some changes and try to get a similar aperture setting that would accommodate the larger sensor size, right? So you have the sensor size is a factor, the lens or focal length is a factor, and then your distance to your subject. Anytime you have a wide angle, you're going to have a deeper depth of field. Now, I didn't bring it with me, but I have a 12mm Rokinon or Samyang lens. Mine's actually a Samyang, and it's a manual focus lens, and it's not a big deal because after a few feet at, like, I don't know, f2.8, f4, everything's in focus. Now, if I was shooting a 56mm or say at a low 100mm focal length, that's not going to be the case, right? So the focal length matters, the sensor size matters, and the distance of your subject. The closer that you are to your subject, if you're right on them, the background will be blurry. If you're further away, you're going to have more things in focus. So, just to kind of remember, and these are just, starting points. Take your photos, look at them, see where you made mistakes, where you want to improve. When we're talking in pictures in depth of field, you're looking at like this photo here. There's some distortion because I'm at 10 millimeter, especially on the sides. In the middle, usually fine. You're going to get distortions on the side, which is perfectly normal. But with that, I'm trying to get everybody. I'm taking everything into account. Okay, I'm shooting at 10 millimeter, so I know that I'm going to step back a little bit. F4 seemed pretty good, and afterwards I'm checking it, and it's pretty much what I was trying to achieve. Right? I'm not going to have any kind of blown out backgrounds because when you have that big depth of field, the consequence is that everything's going to be in focus. This is what I'm trying to go for. I don't want faces that are blurry. So, this worked out. Maybe I could have went a little bit lower if I had a lens. This is a minimum of f4 on the wide angle, but this is what I was going for, and I think I met my objective on this one. Same here. I just walked around, took some photos, and I'm just trying to capture the people, the moment. I didn't want one person in focus and the others not. And I believe this is, again, f4. And I was at a party. I'm not paid to do this, so I was having a couple of drinks myself. So, yeah, I mean, it's not going to be perfect. And this was a portrait I took for my friend and her daughter. And I switched over. This is the, no, I guess I didn't. This is 24 millimeter. This is a 10 to 24 at 24 millimeters. And this is f4 as well. So I had the same lens, same aperture setting, and I typically do that. If I'm walking around inside, outside, if I have my camera, if I'm in a building, I have it set for f2. A lot of times when I walk outside, because again, inside, it's going to be a shallow, but outside at f2, it'll probably work. And I can show you some, I don't want to make this video too long, but it doesn't impact it as much because of the distance between you and your subject. And I'm not going to be flipping back and forth, back and forth, back and forth every time I walk in and out of a building when I'm on vacation. So this is f4. We have some separation in the background. Both people are, sharp in focus. And I had some funny colors the way the backlight lit was. So I went to black and white, and it worked. A lot of people like this picture. I'm going to show you some things that maybe weren't the greatest. So I think this is one. So this isn't bad. I pulled it off. Everybody liked it. There's a couple photos. If I go into my settings here, I'm shooting this with my 35 millimeter. I'm really starting to love that lens at f2.5. Now, when you're shooting at a lower aperture, which is the bigger of the opening, but the lower number, you in order to get your subjects, if you have multiples, you want to get their eyes in alignment the best you can. So I kind of staged these folks because I knew that I was kind of starting dipping in lower in the aperture numbers. So I'm trying to line up their eyeballs in the same plane with me. So as you can see, it worked out very well. They're all in focus and very, very sharp. I'm very happy with that one. This is a little different. See, they're starting to curve out, if you will. So I have the person on the left. I think I probably have my focus on him or the second individual here. And I think I didn't change my setting. 2.5, same setting. And I should have tweaked it, or if I would have been paying better attention, instead of having the folks in 4 curve around, I would have had the two people on the right step in maybe a half a step, because I want to try to line up, again, the same focal plane for their eyeballs. Now when I zoom in on this one, you can see The lady on the left is good. Her daughter is just starting to creep out of focus. And then the grandfather is, it still works. It's still a good photo, but I can tell that I'm starting to lose focus. If I zoom in, it's not quite there. Definitely a saved photo, but I probably should have shot this at 2.8. Usually I shoot 2.8 on probably 2 or more folks, or at least in the same plane, because I need a little bit of buffer. I'm not perfect, and I probably should have paid a little bit more attention and got them on the same plane. Now, if you shoot every picture on the same plane, it's kind of boring. That's why, you know, you increase your aperture a little bit. I should have bumped it up to 2.8, maybe even a little higher, but it's still fine. Same thing with this photo. Again, it was a little lazy. I left it at f2, 35mm f2, and I just kind of left it. Grandma, the granddaughter, and the dad works, but not quite as sharp on the back because you know, I did try to balance the focus point. One thing you're doing is, if you're aware that you have you know, 2 people on a different focal plane, meaning you have these 2 individuals in the front, 1 in the back, you could flip it over to manual and you can kind of try to go in between both of them. So you try to get a focal in between. Now, if you have this on, if you have your camera on autofocus, you're going to probably lock on one of the individual's eyes, like you're normally taking a photograph. But if you flip over to manual, you can actually tweak it and fall in middle of the focal plane. Now, if you have people maybe standing in front, it's easy because even with autofocus, you can lock on the middle person. But in this case, I don't have a middle person. I have someone in front and someone behind. So again, I think, like I said, f2, I probably should have went at least f2.8 on this. Not bad, but it's not quite perfect either. Let's look at a couple others, see if I can call out anything in particular. Now, this one's okay. You know, there's 2 people pretty close to the focal plane. I could have probably had our grandfather maybe a quarter step forward, and I'm shooting that at f2. I pretty much locked it on f2 and just ran with it, but it worked. And for this, the reason I was dipping, I was playing my numbers, or playing hedging my bet, because the background wasn't the greatest, and I was trying to blur it out a little bit. That's why, you know, people, they set their cameras, they get these lenses like my 56mm f1.2. Even when I have my 56mm, I hardly ever shoot it at f1.2 because I'm often taking it to graduations and stuff like that, and I'll lock it into 1.2 to shoot 1 or 2 pictures of the individual by themselves. Forget about multiples, you know, I mean multiple subjects within the same photo. I always bump it up. That, or one of them is going to be blurry, unless you get them exactly on the same plane, and that it's very, very, very difficult. So I don't even try. I'll just bump it up when I get multiple subjects for the same frame. So yeah, let's take a look at this one. I don't even remember looking at this one. You know, older people with wrinkles, it's great. Character comes out, and this one, it pulled it off, right? Again, I was going for that same plane. There's a little bit of an adjustment, not bad, not enough to throw it off. I was at f2.5. See, I did bump it up here, and you can see the difference. If I was still at f2, the lady on the right would be out of focus. You'd be able to see it. Her eyes and her facial would be starting to just not quite sharp. I must have realized it. I took these a little while ago. I don't remember exactly, but I did bump it up to 2.5. 2.8 is really like where I would prefer, you know, hindsight, and that's my suggestion to you. If you're starting off, know your camera. But one person, it don't matter. If you're trying to blow out the background, shoot it wide open, which means the lowest aperture, or anything in between. If you're trying to shoot 2 people, 3 people in the same plane, I would go 2.8. You can play with the settings. If you're trying to get a little bit blurrier background, drop it. But it doesn't hurt to take a couple settings. You could lock your camera if you have a Fujifilm, but really all the cameras you can shoot in Aperture Priority and take some photos at 2.8, drop it down to f2, take some photos. So you have some safety shots, but if you want to blur out the background a little bit, you can try it, but you still have your safety shots just in case you have a lot of out of focus subjects, faces in your photos. So 2.8 is what I suggest. Same focal plane, multiple people, 2, 3 people. 4, you're kind of pushing it, just because you're going to get a natural movement, and like you've seen in the other photo, they're going to start curving around, right? I'd start going up closer to f4 in that case. Now, if I have a larger group, you know, you could go up to 5, 6, and an APS-C camera, and it's different than full frame. I probably tend to not go above 5, 6, maybe a little bit above. Now, if I'm shooting a large group and there's multiple rows of people, I'd probably start off at 5, 6, and then do some pixel peeping. Tell people hold on, or do some test shots, and see where I go from there. Maybe even start off bumping up a little higher than 5, 6. But for an APS-C camera, that kind of gets into its sweet spot at about 5.6. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. And again, this is around portraits, and if we'll talk landscapes maybe in another video. I don't want to make this really long, but if you guys have any direct questions, feel free to post them, or would like a follow-up video. If you're struggling and you need some help, yeah, please leave it in your comments. I'd be glad to help. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Bye now.